Good morning, everybody, and welcome and thank you for joining us today on our webinar talking about why every click counts and how we design digital journeys for good customer outcomes. My name is Farad Mir. I'm the head of advisory here at Arum, which is an independent global consultancy helping clients to solve all their problems when it comes to collections and recoveries. I'm joined by Simon Pritchard today from Flexys. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Flexys, please?
Sure. Hi, welcome. Thanks everybody for having me. Simon Pritchard, I'm product manager here at Flexys. I've been at Flexys just over 2 years, working in the product team. Before that, worked across education and technology for just over 20 years in delivery and product. Flexys, we're an enterprise debt management software provider, working across all verticals from utilities, motor finance, loans, asset finance, covering pretty much everything everywhere. And ultimately, we provide a service for any company who is extending credit to customers. So our software helps those companies to be able to help their customers to manage and hopefully get back on track with any problems that they have with their credit.
Thank you. Now, as with all our webinars, we welcome audience participation. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screens a Q&A section. So please do ask as many questions as you like, and Simon and I will do our best to answer them for you. If we get lots of questions, which is what we want, and we don't get a chance to cover them all, then we'll happily give you answers to those after the session and send them out to everybody. So we will answer all of your questions, so please do take the time to ask. We'll also got some polls coming up as well to see what you think about what we're talking about and the issues that raises. So please do take the opportunity to get involved. It really does make the session a bit more interactive and make sure that we're actually talking about things that you want to talk about and things that you want to hear as well. So Simon, we're talking today about the difference between sludge and friction and why every click counts. So tell us, why is the FCA interested in this at the minute?
So the FCA actually published some research back in July of this year. It's based on some research that was conducted in 2022, and it was based on a fictitious customer credit scenario, so essentially applying for a loan. So it was UK based. They had a number of participants, just over 6,045 completed the scenario, and they used this research to inform FCA views. And ultimately, the outcome of that was that information, when it was presented to customers in different ways, it may, in some cases, significantly affect comprehension of what's being presented and or consumer behaviour. So yeah, it did make a significant difference. So what they did try to do is, by obscuring some of the information, so making it either through a drop down or a click away or multiple clicks away, some of that information that described the loan and described things like the repayment terms, by moving that even just one click away from the actual journey itself, that significantly reduced the comprehension of what was being offered to that customer. Okay.
Let's just, I guess, start with some of the basics. What is a digital journey? I guess how does that differ from an analog journey, if that's the right term to use?
Sure. So ultimately, a digital journey is one that's conducted online. So generally here we're talking about a series of steps through a particular process. So in this example, through the research that was done, this was a process of a customer applying for a loan. Really, ultimately, when considering making journeys available and right for your customers, whether it's digital or not shouldn't really matter. It should be the same for both. But obviously the focus here was on digital journeys being done online.
Okay, and so I mean, we're talking to lots of clients at the minute about digitizing journeys because it's obviously the benefits of cost reduction and all those other things, as well as customer sort of engagement are there to be sort of gained from experience. But when we are designing digital journeys, what kind of things should we be thinking about? Why does digital design matter, perhaps more or less, over analog journey design?
Sure. So it's about presenting the right information at the right time. So as the research note described, presenting information maybe before somebody gets to a journey, before they start that journey, with maybe long terms and conditions at the very start before beginning. If that journey becomes, say, a multiple step process where there might be, 5, 6, 7 screens before they get to their final decision, often that information that may have been presented at the beginning may well have been forgotten about or lost or just not available. So it's really important, and research showed this, was that it's really important to try and provide the right information to help that customer at the right moment in that journey. So not necessarily at the beginning, not necessarily a big long list of everything possible right at the very end before a decision. Potentially drip feeding, a little bit here, a little bit there, but presenting that right information at the right time through that journey.
Okay. In my mind, I'm sort of thinking of a series of screens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, following some kind of linear flow that
Yep.
someone has set up. Is that the right way to be thinking about it, or should we be thinking about it in a different way?
Yeah, so I think as a process, yes, going through steps, from a screens 1 to 5, it's also about within those screens, if there's information that is relevant, say in screen 3, presenting the information there at that point. So if you're asking a question about, I don't know, somebody's address details, maybe in screen 3, presenting information there that might be relevant to their address. So, it's only available to UK customers. So obviously, if you type in an international address, that wouldn't be valid. So, it's really about trying to present the right information at the right time, not necessarily a big long list right at the beginning or at the very end.
Okay. What is Flexys doing on with sort of AI at the minute, and how is that, or what's the thinking around, in your company around how you might be able to use AI to try and make some of these digital journeys a bit more dynamic than perhaps, what might have been in the past where, as I said, quite linear.
Sure. So as part of what we've built in our journey design tool within Flexys, we have the ability to respond and navigate the journey depending on information that is entered by the client.
Mhm.
So if a customer maybe has answered a question on page 2 that might indicate a vulnerability, that may then, depending on the design and how either we have designed it or a client, because we have the ability for clients to design these journeys themselves. We do have the ability then to direct and steer that journey based on the responses from the customer. So rather than a very linear, a very standard, a very restrictive journey that is the same for absolutely everybody, our tool set and our options that are available allow for a really dynamic journey, again based on the individual circumstances of the customer. Whether that's vulnerability, as I've used there, if their particular circumstances are very complex, it might be that being able to continue through a journey to the end might not be possible for their own personal circumstances. So our journey design is there so that if there are complicated circumstances, it can then ultimately output to steer that customer to speak to an agent, just to speak to the organization. So we're at the moment exploring how we can supplement that with artificial intelligence and large language models. I think certainly at the moment we're considering it, we're looking at it, we're evaluating it. I think some of our clients have expressed caution about necessarily exposing that directly to customers now. So it's an area we're exploring. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with you. We're doing quite a bit of work. I'm actually doing a proof of concept with a client at the moment around sort of using AI precisely for that kind of use case. And just looking at some of the solutions that are on the market. I mean, I'd look lots of potential and actually quite excited by some of the things that I'm seeing. But equally, I think, some of those risks, should we say, certainly when it comes to compliant, journeys and making sure that the FCA don't come down in, because interestingly, the FCA haven't, as their regulatory approach, they haven't actually tried to regulate technology. They're trying to still saying, oh, we're regulating the outcomes. We don't mind whether you do it by a pen or paper or using AI, as long as you are compliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is again very interesting in terms of how they're approaching it. Probably, I suggest, probably passing the buck a bit to some extent by saying, yeah, it's up to you to figure it out. But equally, I'm sort of thinking, well, actually, is the FCA the best person to be advising anybody on technology, on any technology, let alone AI?
Sure.
So it's
Yeah,
probably
and I think
the right place.
the big thing for us really is the consistency of the responses. So I
Yeah.
think, for lots of us, you might ask, chat GPT a particular question, you ask it the same question 2 seconds later, and you may well get a very different response. So I think for us, some of that consistency of response, and also not necessarily having, an open large language model is something that we're sort of looking at and considering.
Okay, great. So if I was someone sort of starting out thinking about, right, how do I start digitizing my journeys? How do I start designing them? Where should I start? And perhaps just tell us what the sludge and deceptive practices are,
Sure.
and how I can avoid those.
Sure. So I'll just read you some definitions just so that everybody's clear about that. So in the report, sludge was defined as excessive friction that hinders consumers from making decisions in their interests. So going back to that scenario and the scenario that they used in the research note there, having information about the interest calculation and the annual percentage rate for the loan that somebody was applying for, if that information is through a drop down or a click or multiple clicks away from where that customer is applying, that is sludge. It's defined as excessive friction. It's having them move away from where they are, having to go and find something out, having to go and work it out potentially themselves. Whereas positive friction, which I think is something that everybody should consider in a journey, is around intentionally slowing down a journey to help customers make fully informed decisions. So rather than the scenario we talked about, five screens or 5 steps in a flow, it may well be that fourth or fifth step, the very last one before somebody is actually making that final commitment, you're going to actually make them read through some information, have an extra click or an extra tick box to confirm that they've read that information and they know what they understand what they're doing before they actually commit to making that application. And then the very last one, I think, deceptive design. So that is defined as elements or elements within the screen, UI elements that lead customers into taking actions which may be against their best interests. So I'll give you a quick example. I was looking at it the other day. Amazon Prime, I'm sure everybody knows and everybody has a view on Amazon Prime. Ultimately, in their cancellation process to be able to cancel that, they've actually got all three. They've got sludge, they've got positive friction, and they've got deceptive design. So the positive friction, they have a confirmation step of, are you sure you wish to cancel? Is this right for you? The sludge, however, they actually do that are you sure multiple times. I went through it the other day just as an example, and there were 5 different screens that had an are you sure you wish to cancel. So that tells you probably something around that. And the last one there around deceptive design, on each of those screens as I was going through them, the cancel button or the yes confirm or yes I really really want to do this, that was designed to look and feel and very very close to each other, exactly the same as the button that said no I wish to carry on subscribing. So I think Amazon's a really good example of all 3 of those.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions from Kevin
Sure.
about sort of design. Can I just put some of these to you and see how you
Sure.
respond? So the first one is, how are you addressing customer understanding through the journey from a duty perspective? So if this is a consumer duty, including AI to support the consumer. For example, layering messaging. So I guess it's more about if I'm starting out to design my processes, how do I take into account what the regulator is expecting versus what I might be wanting from a company or from a commercial point of view?
Sure. So I think a lot of and it came out actually in the research note, a lot of what needs to be done is around testing and validating. So it's not only about testing it internally with people who know the sector, know what they're expecting to see, but it's also around being able to test that with potential or existing customers. So within our functionality, within our journey design tooling, we do have that option where you can say, people have always referred to it as sort of champion challenger type scenarios. So we can say, maybe this particular type of thread that we're going to have in our journey, where we might ask a question slightly differently or present some information differently, we may present that to 20% of our customer base for a period. Again, we have all analysis and reporting and recording and auditing of our outcomes within journeys within our software. So again, you can take the outcome of that, look at the analysis, see if that's working, if it's ultimately giving you better or hopefully not worse outcomes, and then you can then look to implement that for your whole 100%.
Okay, and Kevin's also wanting to know, where should ability to pay fit into a journey? Is it onboarding or arrears? Is there an optimal sort of flow to any journey, or should it be customized to a particular circumstance or scenario or sort of situation that we might find?
I guess it sort of depends on the scenario from which you're starting from. I mean, certainly for us, if you're starting from arrears, probably one of the first questions or near to the beginning is your ability to pay. Are you able to pay either all of that outstanding amount or potentially a partial amount? It might be that you today you might only be able to pay an amount of that. So we in our journey we offer the ability to do that. Or it might be that actually today, when you're asking me this question, I'm not able to pay anything, but I might be able to pay that in a week's time. I know I'm getting paid in 2 days' time, so I can pay in a few more days' time. So again, in our standard journey, we do have that option where a customer can make a commitment to pay. So they can say, I can't pay today, but I can make a commitment to pay in, X days' time.
Okay. Let's see what our audience think. Hannah, would you mind putting up the poll when it comes to sort of understanding what digital journeys are and some of the challenges? Let's see what our audience think about that while we move on to the sort of next point, really, which is in terms of positive friction. In your experience, what are the absolute essentials that we should include in a journey which help us to ensure that the clients or the customers are understanding exactly what it is that they are getting into?
Yeah, so I think as I mentioned a little bit earlier, it's around making that intentional slowing down of that journey. So rather than a very quick next to the very end, it's about pausing, slowing down, making sure that there's something there that means that the customer has to look at that, has to read some information and look through it. One of the other things that came out in the research note as well was around simplifying some of the information. Very often you'll see that, although people have a very high level of literacy or a very high level understanding, often when they're in a poor situation, a financial debt or poor circumstances, just being in those circumstances actually reduces people's ability to comprehend and understand. We've done some work and shout out to them today. Mike and the team at Play Numbers, they do a really, really good job of breaking down some of those historical, complex technical terms, making it very easy and straightforward to read and hopefully understand. And I think, for that type of scenario, especially at that very end stage where you're asking somebody to make a commitment, that's where it's really crucial and really important to make it really clear of what somebody is signing up to or agreeing to.
Okay, but the results of our poll are in, as it were, and actually it's really interesting. What pretty much everyone who's responded is saying is that using data to evidence good outcomes to the regulator is probably the biggest challenge that they face. Does that sort of flow with your experience with your clients, and what advice or solutions can you offer to try and help your clients deal with that particular challenge?
Sure. So certainly for us, as I mentioned before, within our platform, everything that is done throughout the platform, whether it's done by a customer in a self-service journey, or whether it's carried out by an agent in the agent side, doing that on behalf of a customer, maybe on the phone, all of that is recorded in an audit trail. So that records absolutely everything, whether that's real-time data from their income expenditure, their I&E, if they've done that through open banking, which we have the ability to do in our journeys. So rather than filling out a potentially very long, drawn-out full SFS document, the customer does have the ability to connect their financial accounts, use that data to generate their income and expenditure outcome and ultimately their budget. So we do have all of that data, specific affordability and vulnerability rules as we go through them. All of those are recorded. That final decision, hopefully a positive one based on the information entered. All of that, the entire sequence, everything that's gone through there, all of that is recorded and logged. So, you know, it's providing that concrete evidence of how an organization has got to that decision to offer a customer, you know, potentially payment plan A or not a payment plan at all. Yeah, it's all there and recorded and available for view.
Okay, thank you. One of the things when I speak to sort of clients about who sort of ask me, look, you know, what's the difference between UK versus other regulatory bodies around the world? Because sort of, you know, for many of you will know, we work in over sort of 20 countries around the world, all the way from sort of Australia, New Zealand, right through to the Americas. So you see a very broad sort of range of requirements and sort of expectations from the regulators in all those jurisdictions. I think one of the things that certainly for me distinguishes the UK over those territories is how proactive the FCA expects us to be over just you know, other places. So it's not just good enough to ask the question and for the customer to tell you, as in that self-declared sort of information, but to be proactive to find information, particularly when it comes to things like vulnerability, that you know, even beyond self-disclosure, I guess. In your experience and sort of in terms of your solution, you know, how can you sort of help your clients to try and leverage the data that they may have within your solution or elsewhere, try and overcome that sort of expectation from the regulator that you've got to go beyond just asking the question, you've got to actually be a bit more proactive
Sure.
to try and understand the circumstances of that customer?
Yeah, so as I say, you know, we capture that information through income and expenditure journeys, whether that's the customer doing it, whether that's the agent doing it on their behalf on the phone. All of this data, whether it's income expenditure, vulnerability disclosures, all of that is housed within one central platform, you know, within our software. So it's all in one place. It's not, you know, spread out in different disparate systems. All of that is available to the agent to look at. So income and expenditure. We work with a company called Invest to offer income maximization data for customers. So as they fill in and complete their income and expenditure, we present to the customer an option to say, you may be entitled to some additional benefits, which obviously may then help their circumstance to then hopefully ultimately give them some additional money to be able to help with their debt. So we have that information, as I mentioned before, open banking, and what we're looking to do, we're working on it at the moment, is have one big holistic view of affordability for that customer. So an agent can look at that particular customer's view within the agent portal and be able to get that, you know, truly holistic view of affordability for that customer, whether that's income spikes, you know, have they had a history of missing payments, you know, that data that we're getting from open banking, from Invest, all of that's going to be coming together to give that agent hopefully that very clear view of how they can help, and then ultimately, you know, a customer will be able to see that themselves in the customer portal, and an agent and ultimately the organization can use that to hopefully be proactive in helping somebody with their arrears and their debt.
Thank you. Hannah, can we have our next poll, please? While we move on. Kevin is asking lots of questions. Please do ask more questions, and it's not just Kevin on his own, but no, we're good to see those. Kevin asks, where does data sharing fit in, where the customer has a shared INE with firms like iHub or the vulnerability data through the Vulnerability Registration Service? So do you find that your sort of clients are using shared data resources, or do they prefer to use their own data?
Certainly at the moment, we tend to see certainly firms that we've been dealing with tend to use their own. Not to say that they wouldn't in future, or that, you know, we have had some people express some interest in data sharing. Within our software, the the SFS that is produced, so based on either the client filling it in themselves or the agent doing it on their behalf, we do have that option to produce an output of that SFS data that they've completed. The customer can then take that away and use that to share themselves with other organizations. Whether or not we do that in future, that again, we're open to that. I think it's something that we could certainly look at in the future.
Okay, great. So interim results from our poll, 29% of people saying that they are using open banking, which is interesting. But also 29% are also saying that they're in the early stages of understanding what's possible. And actually 43 hadn't started to sort of think about that. What advice would you give people who are starting on that journey or haven't quite got around to thinking about sort of, how they should be using data? What advice would you give them to understand the implications, the risks, the benefits, and how they might be able to use that in their business?
Sure. I think it's a really interesting topic. I think it is growing momentum. It is something that we're seeing more and more people asking about and asking for. I guess what I would say is it's ultimately in the control of the customer. And I think for a lot of end users, it's about education about the benefits. I think what we try to do, and again, as we talked about here, right information at the right time at that point in our journey where the customer has the option to go either down an open banking route or filling out SFS. We try and make it very clear to them that this is about connecting your data. You're in control of it. They can revoke that access later if they so chose. It's I think really it's about education. I think for a lot of end users at the moment, open banking is still quite a new thing and a new concept. And I think historically lots of people, we've always had that thing about don't click accept things about spam, and especially when it comes to banking and personal information. I think a lot of end users certainly at the moment are understandably nervous about it, but I think the education piece I think is really important around the benefits of open banking, really.
Yeah. And in your experience from your clients who have or who are using some of those sort of shared data sources or third-party sources like open banking, and those who don't, is there a material difference in I guess in their performance or in their risk profiles, or can you say, oh yeah, I can see that that's a customer who's using data really well, and that's a client who's not using data really well, and actually there's a material difference in the way that they're performing or their outcomes that they are getting for their customers?
Yeah, I think it's quite mixed at the moment. I think there is a bit of a I think a lot of it is more around the choice of being able to use it. So at the moment, one of the clients that we're working with, we're leaving that as an open choice. So a customer has an option to say, connect your financial accounts, essentially going down open banking route, or fill in some information yourself, which will mean that you need to go and find this information. It may take you a bit longer, etc. One of the things that we are starting to explore with another one of our clients is actually not making those options available to the customer, but basing those options based on a risk profile that the client has from the customer. So, somebody who maybe has gone first time in arrears, they've otherwise been in good standing, they may well be offered a short income and expenditure form to fill in. So maybe just some high level information, high level detail. Somebody who maybe is more of a medium risk, so multiple instances of arrears, hasn't always been in good standing. They may have a different set of options or a restricted choice. And then maybe somebody at a high risk end, we may steer them towards having to use open banking because we know that is definitive data. It's actually from their from their banking. So lots of different options, and I guess ultimately we're saying here, our journey configuration is really flexible, so all options are on the table.
Okay, so let's imagine for a minute that I was one of your clients who look, I get the value and the benefits of using third-party data sources. I just don't trust them, right? I don't trust things leaking out, and I don't trust that I'm not going to be on the news the next morning, saying something's happened and my reputation's in the gutter.
Sure.
What can you do? What can Flexys do to sort of give me some reassurance that, you know what? Yes, there are some risks, but they are manageable risks. That they are risks that can be addressed in a structured way that makes them acceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, all the connections that are done through third parties are, through standard industry-wide encryptions, and it's using standard, banking technology and functionality. That said, if that is genuinely something that a client doesn't want to go through, the journey can be configured not to use those. And as we talked about before, very flexible, very dynamic, based on the information that only the customer has filled in themselves, or the agent is doing on the customer's behalf. So, we've got that, real flexibility between, at one end, maybe using lots of third party information, connecting out securely and appropriately, right the way through to, it's your journey. You will have the fields that you want to collect, and those are the fields that we'll use to determine the outcomes.
Okay. We have another question from Kevin.
Sure.
Do you integrate with speech analytics platforms and bots that enable vulnerability detection at scale?
So at the moment, no. That is something we are looking at through some of our technology partners. At the moment, our web interface is, going through web forms, so filling in fields, drop downs, etc. It is something that we're looking at, as I say, with some of our technology telephony partners in particular, as well as potentially looking at voice capture in the browser. I think, there are, pros and cons to doing that. Again, it's something we're definitely looking into. Never say never. Yeah.
Okay. I again, sort of talking to clients, I often say, look, one of the good things about having a data first approach is scaling is far easier, right? I mean, you can understand things far more easily when you have a very good data based approach than if it's more analog based approach, right? I should say, for sake of simplicity. Is that, I guess, does that sort of follow with your experience that, look, in a business or a collection process that is based fundamentally on using data, leveraging data, can provide far more flexibility and ease of scalability? And if so, what challenges do you find that clients do come with in terms of scaling up, and how does data help them with that?
Yeah, I think, we talked about it a little bit before, maybe, the having the ability to analyze the data that you're getting back from those client journeys, being able to look at the outcomes, that should always feed back into your reviews, your subsequent review of that journey. I think, not only here, but, in other organizations I've worked before, the biggest frustration that I've always had is when you get a response, and I'm sure you've had it as well, Farid. People will say, we've always done it this way, so why should we do it again? Why should we look at it and do anything different? I think, the data will always give you that information. So, whether you do that, 6 monthly, 12 monthly, weekly is probably a bit excessive for a journey, but I think, being able to look at the outcomes based on that information that has been collected, based on the information that you have from the customer, and then use that to make a subsequent review and move your journey forward, hopefully every time, is exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah, again, one of the benefits I often sort of share with clients is, look, if it's data based, then you can go to 100% monitoring. Whereas if it's, good old fashioned call listening, well, 100% call listening, it has its place. I'm not suggesting it doesn't.
Yeah.
But it doesn't give you the same value and benefit of scalability that you might get from 100% sort of analysis using database QA. Okay, so tying this sort of back to the beginning in terms of journeys, sludge, positive fiction. Okay, when I'm thinking about designing a journey, how should I sort of bring together these different tenets of customer experience, good data design, okay, flexibility in the journey so that it can respond to, you know, the customer's unique circumstances. How do I make all that magic happen in a nice, simple, easy way?
So I think, you know, really, I mean, of course I'm going to say it, you know, we in our tool, we do have the ability to do all of those things together.
Okay.
So, you know, whether that's responding to data that's been completed, and then based on that outcome, you might go to a different page, or you might refer somebody to support. So, as I say, you know, if a vulnerability has been declared, you might actually say, we're not able to do a self-service for valid various reasons. So you might then refer on to an agent, whether that is through secure messaging, which we have the ability to do, or a help and support page, or, you know, potentially speaking to somebody on the phone. I think it's about putting positive friction in at the right point. So not necessarily every single time, you know, five options for are you sure? It's about when you do have that positive friction, you're slowing down that journey to make sure somebody understands. It's really about making sure that the language and the information is there, making sure that it's the right type of language and the right level of language to make sure that we can make it as understandable and as clear as possible for when that decision happens. And you know, using things like jargon-free language. You know, lots of us, you know, financial services language is often quite technical and quite complex. Within financial services, lots of people will know terms, but a customer who is maybe in arrears for the first time, maybe has only come to this, you know, only come to the portal for the very first time when it's happened, they're not going to understand all of the financial services terms. So making it clear, understandable, jargon free is really important too.
Okay. Kev is in my mind. Kevin, I'm worried. You know exactly what I'm thinking here. I was going to ask you, who should be involved in designing journeys, and who would you recommend should be involved in when you're working with your clients? And Kevin's question, which is one I'll come to, is what's the role of consumers in that design process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there is a role for the organization to play. You know, those in the teams that are wanting the outcomes and the data back. You know, I think they are important, but very often you'll see that those types of people within an organization end up being the only people involved in that journey design, which I think is, you know, sometimes not ideal. So I think having existing customers being involved, so whether that is through that sort of journey testing we talked about before, the sort of champion challenger type scenarios, or whether you have within your organization a kind of focus group type setup. So, you know, you may have a group where you can test some information, you know, test some options, get some feedback that way, rather than necessarily doing it as a live, you know, a real live demo and test. I think there is a role for organizations like the FCA to have. I think, you know, it's probably not necessarily a come on in and have a go at our journey and see what you think, but I think, you know, that conversation, that dialogue that you'd have with the regulator or other organizations, I think is really important. I've mentioned before, you know, plane numbers are really good. You know, some external organizations to get some support and some feedback from. Money Advice Trust are always really good. We've just had a client community day this week for some of our clients, and we've had some conversations with staff from Money Advice Trust around journey design, which was really good. You know, they're available. By all means, get in touch with them. You know, they'll you know, give you some really good feedback and hopefully make journeys better for everybody.
Okay. If I was starting out on this sort of, use the pardon, journey of customer digitizing journeys, in your experience, where's the best place for me to start? Should I start with a bit of the journey, or try and think of a whole journey, or try and eat the whole elephant at once? What's the best place to start for me?
I think it's useful. It's probably a multi-pronged approach, I guess. I think it's useful to be able to record and come out with the data that you want to collect. So, you know, whether that is, you know, something as simple and as high level as, we want a monthly budget outcome, but then also have some thought around some of the data that you might need to capture that would support how that journey might be dynamic. So, if you have a particular question where you're asking somebody if they have a vulnerability, that may then steer the journey to go a particular direction or not, as the case may be. So I think there's, the data that you want to collect. I think also what kind of outcomes would happen. So again, using that example, if somebody is declaring a vulnerability, is that into a different type of data capture, or is that a stop point where you wouldn't be able to carry on, or is that a referral somewhere else? Yeah, I think it's getting everybody involved. I think having those people to input to that as well, I think is really, really important.
Okay, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, so please do
Sure.
ask any other questions that anyone has, and give Kevin a bit of a break because he's thankfully giving us lots of questions today. Thank you, Kevin, for that. We do appreciate it. A couple of questions from me. So again, put me in the place where I'm really excited about digital journeys and I want to try and introduce it to my business. If I had that 30-second elevator journey with one of my execs, what advice could you give me? And what should I be saying to that exec to try and win over their support or an investment that might be needed? What are the benefits and I guess using that ROI, that I'm sure the execs are lovely that term, that I should be communicating to those people to get support for digitizing my journeys.
Sure. I mean, ultimately, a good journey and a good outcome is, it may not appear on the face of it, but it is going to drive that commercial value. We had some examples before where we've talked to some end users from some of our clients where they've said, I've been in a really difficult situation. I might not have necessarily had a good general experience, but actually I'm going to stick with this company because when it was really bad, when I was in that really bad situation, I had a nice, clear, simple, straightforward journey. I got an outcome where I got back on track, and that for that particular customer gave them that real sense of they care. They sorted me out. I can move on. That customer satisfaction was there. So when it really mattered, when they were in that arrears situation, circumstances had gone against them, they were able to sort it out, and actually they were able to do that at a time of their choosing through self-service. It wasn't I need to go and take a break from my work to go and make a phone call and speak to somebody in the middle of the day. I could do this when it was convenient for me. After I've put the kids to bed, after I've sorted everything out, I can sit down and think about it and go through it and sort it. And that it's going to build trust, customer satisfaction, and ultimately, if that is a consistent behavior and lots of your customers are doing that, you're going to get those consistent recovery rates and hopefully ultimately customer retention. Bit of a long elevator pitch, but yes,
that's okay. And I think you've sort of answered some of the points that I think Blair was raising in his question, which is how would you measure the success of a journey? Would it be based solely on volume of outcomes, or is customer feedback important, or a mixture of both?
I think it is a mixture of both. I think as I've just said, really, there's the outcomes. Are we getting positive outcomes? But I think also, and again, we've got the data to be able to support it. It's also testing those outcomes as well. So just because somebody has had, an outcome of a repayment plan, really it's that longer term review as well. Have they actually stuck to that plan? Was the plan that you offered them something that they stuck with and ultimately got them back on track and back there? And I think it's not just about getting an outcome, it's is that outcome right for the customer and do they stick with it?
Okay, great. Listen, Simon, I really enjoyed that conversation. I think it's been really useful and some really interesting points, I think, that are certainly in the work that I'm doing with some of my clients quite pertinent. So thank you for that. In terms of any last minute thoughts, if I was wanting to, sort of do more around digital journeys and digitizing my sort of customer experience. Where should I go next? What can I do to try and get support and help and find resources that might be useful?
So I think, as I mentioned before, there's some really great organizations out there that can help. Simplification of language, making that language clear and understandable, really, really important. Journey design, there are people out there, as I say, Money Advice Trust have got some really good guidance and really good information. Plain numbers are really good for the communication. And obviously we're here too. You can come and talk to us.
Okay, great. On that note, thank you very much, Simon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to the audience
Thanks, everybody.
for being with us today. And thank you for Kevin and Blair for your questions.
Yeah, thank you.
Really appreciated those. Okay. This is the last of our webinars this year. At least me to say thank you very much to everyone who's joined us this year. I can see some very familiar names in the audience today. So thank you for returning. We do appreciate your custom, as it were, and for everyone, wish you a peaceful Christmas and New Year, and look forward to see you again in 2026. Thank you very much, and bye.
Thanks, everyone.